Budget workshop agenda, special session of the City Commission, City of Kissimmee, on today's date, August 25th, starting now at 5:30. Introductions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. Good evening, and thank you again for your time today. Good news is we, in having our first two budget workshops, we were able to narrow down the things that we needed to do in order to balance the budget, and I'm pleased to present to you today a balanced budget request that does very minimal damage in terms of significant cuts in order to balance, and does not ask the Commission to increase any revenue streams in order to balance either. The theme of the budget is Propel. Originally I was going to call it Survival because I really didn't think that we were going to be able to do much in this budget to balance it, but the good news is through the hard work of the departments and the finance and budget team, we were able to get to a place that we're able to propel the city forward in meeting your objectives as a commission and pursuing those initiatives and projects that are important to move the city forward, while at the same time ensuring that the city budget is well within the means of our revenue streams that are before us. This year we propose a budget that maintains a millage of 4.6253 for the 18th year in a row. What you will see is that the total proposed budget is almost $322 million, and what we had adopted last year was $310 million. But the real story lies in the general fund, and that's where we see the biggest issues. General fund, as you know, is funded about a third by property taxes, about 50% through utility revenues from KUA and Toho Water Authority, and then the remainder of funding comes from various sources, including service charges, state distributions, utility taxes, franchise fees. And what you'll see with the general fund is that we actually are decreasing the total general fund from last year by around 1%. The good news is we project at the end of this upcoming budget year, at the end of 2027, we'll be able to maintain a 31% reserve, even though we are projecting to dip into those reserves by about $5 million for this upcoming budget year in order to help us balance. So it's actually less. I think the last workshop we had proposed around an $8 million dip into reserves, and we were able to reduce that through a number of measures, and as well we saw revenues that looked like they were a little bit better than we originally had forecasted. So this budget, where it does become a little painful, is that we do not propose any new positions for fiscal year 2027. And in lieu of, to the best that we can afford to do this, in lieu of doing any position elimination, we're going to try our best to carry forward with a hiring freeze through the fiscal year, save for those positions that are critical in nature. If we can keep approximately 20 to 25 of those positions vacant from general fund for the year, we should be able to avoid dipping into the reserve any further. In addition, what we've done with this budget is, with regard to personnel, is we have proposed a 3% raise for our workforce. That does not include the police collective bargaining team, which we're in the process of negotiating, and likely that will be a higher increase in order to keep pace with the salaries that the sheriff and St. Cloud are negotiating at this time. This budget also takes all of our capital expenditures out of general fund and places it within the sales tax fund. That was necessary because of the flat revenues that we're seeing that are feeding the general fund itself. And because of that, there will be several projects that we won't be able to pursue this upcoming year. But the good news is those projects that were part of the Commission's priorities will continue to move forward, as well as those critical projects that we feel are necessary in order to mitigate things like stormwater issues and flooding, as well as traffic signal and safety issues and resurfacing for the city, which we've been able to do a real good job over the last year and a half in paving 49 miles repaving 49 miles of streets. With that, I'm going to turn over the floor to Finance Director Tavia Ritchie, who will give you a little bit more in-depth overview of the budget. And then following that, we will go through each of the department's pages at the pleasure of the Commission.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. So the GFOA did a survey of over 1,100 finance professionals across the nation on the biggest challenges facing governments that they foresee. And what you see on the screen are the top answers that they selected. So you'll see funding revenue pressures that's related to revenue being less than, expenditures lagging behind. Technology and cybersecurity came in second on the list. Just think ERPs and cyber threats. Federal and state uncertainty, just think mandates coming down from federal and the state level, as well as unstable funding streams. So those grants that we've been pursuing, it's unsure whether or not they'll keep coming in to what level. Staffing and retention, just think turnover, staff retirements and talent shortages, and then inflation and costs. And that's pretty much what we're seeing here. And that's why we chose the theme Propel. Partly driven by a lot of the drivers that you've seen on that previous screen, but we wanted to make sure this budget represented our commitment to turn uncertainty into momentum and to continue moving the city forward. And so the city's overall budget for fiscal year 2027 proposed is just under $322 million. That's a 3.6% increase over last year's budget. So keep in mind, as the budget grows, it may mean that reserves are growing with the budget. So our $322 million budget does include just over $92 million of reserves. That's up from the $74 million in reserves that we saw last year. However, this is spread out across all funds. So general fund actually stayed flat with our amount of reserves. The reserve increases are actually concentrated in our mobility fee fund, stormwater, and the building fund. So you've seen this slide before, but repetition makes for familiarity. A couple weeks ago, we certified the proposed millage at 4.6253, as Mike said. That rate is what appeared on trim notices that went out to property owners a couple of weeks ago as well. So that rate will still keep us in the low percentile of the state, but it'll also now bring in just over $33 million in property taxes for next year. Now that amount, although it is a 7.7% increase over what we saw in values last year, it still isn't enough to cover the police and fire budgets. Both of those budgets combined are $70 million. It would be just enough to cover fire. And so with our recommended operating millage rate being 4.6253, the calculation for a rollback rate boils down to actually 4.5144. So if we were to adopt that, that would be roughly $800,000 less that we would see. For fiscal year 2027, we saw a net new taxable value of just over $255 million throughout the city. We also saw reassessments in new taxable value for a total of almost $542 million, bringing us to an overall assessed value of $7.5 billion citywide. And so if you'll look at the chart on the screen, you'll see from 2022 to 2027, we averaged about $193 million in net new taxable value throughout the city. 2026 was really an outlier with that $355 million jump. We had $355 million in net new taxable value, and then if you compare that to the reassessments, we had $763 million in reassessments last year compared to the 541 this year. But the average being about $193 million since 2022, that equates over to dollars in about 897,000. So if you put that in terms of the budget of an increase, it would be like a 2% increase for police personnel. So although it is a majority of our budget, it doesn't substantially cover increases in costs. So our overall budget for the general fund, I just need to say proposed, our overall proposed budget for the general fund for fiscal year 2027 is $159,559,219. That does include $38 million of reserves. And so on the revenue side, we anticipate $116.4 million. That's a 4.9% increase from last fiscal year. And a lot of that increase is made up of our core revenues. So think ad valorem, KUA, TOHO, and our newly implemented fire assessment fee. Our projected expenditures are, as Mike said, 1% less than what we adopted last year. That's $887,000 less than what we adopted last year for $121.5 million. Now, the math is a little bit unforgiving because you'll see that we are drawing on reserves, as Mike said, as evidenced by the $5.1 million being in red. So there is a $5.1 million reliance on fund balance for fiscal year 2027. Which is not a sustainable approach as we are leaving out capital and no additional personnel being added to the budget. So fiscal year 27 cost drivers. We showed this slide on all of our workshops that we've had. The story remains the same, with a lot of the cost drivers being concentrated in that personnel category, with pension coming in second at a 15% increase for next year, and then healthcare seeing a 12.9% increase, jumping up to about $20,000 per employee for next year. And so on the previous slide, I showed that our revenue was increasing about 4.9% from last year. That equates over to about a $5.4 million increase in revenue from last year. However, if you break it out, there's $1.4 million going to where the values increased in the CRAs, so that has to be transferred over to the trust funds. And then in the pension realm, there's $1.8 million increase related to the general fund. And on the healthcare side, there's $1.8 million of an increase related to the general fund. So that right there eats up that revenue increase that we saw of the $5 million. And so that's why you see us dipping into reserves, because if you just concentrate it to those categories right there, you'll see why there's no funding left really for capital or operating increases. And so we'll shift away from our general fund and talk a little bit about our utility funds. A lot of this has not changed from a couple of weeks ago when we presented. So our utility funds, the city has 3 of them. They operate much like a business, so that's why we charge fees. So our stormwater fund, we are projected to generate approximately $8.1 million next fiscal year. That's an increase from last fiscal year of $7.6 million. The current ERU per month is now $11.39. That's 30 cents higher than what it was last year due to CPI increases, and there are no new positions planned for this fund. The biggest capital improvements planned for this fund are mill run and North Kissimmee drainage improvements, as well as a street sweeper for fiscal year 27. So our solid waste fund is projected to generate approximately $8.25 million in fiscal year 27. That's up from the $8 million that we saw last year, with the current rate per month for residential at $25.03 per month. That's up from the $24.92 that we charged this current year. And so this fund is using reserves to balance, but it's to fund one-time capital purchases. There's a dump truck and a garbage truck in that fund. However, no new positions are planned for this fund either. And lastly, the smallest of our enterprise funds, the airport fund, small but mighty. It is projected to generate approximately $3.1 million in fiscal year 27. And it's heavily supported by grant matches and landing fees, and no new positions are planned for this fund as well, with the biggest capital programmed in this fund being our airport tower and taxiway rehab project. So aside from the general fund, 3 enterprise funds, the city has a good number of special revenue funds. The biggest ones are presented here on the screen. So our local option gas tax funds, those funds are restricted to transportation-related maintenance and construction. That fund is projected to have $3.1 million in revenue generated next year. The revenue is trending flat from what we are projected to collect this year. However, we did have to revise what we anticipated collecting from the budget last year. We anticipated collecting $3.5 million. However, we've revised that down $400,000 to $3.1 million. So the biggest project in local option gas tax fund is going to be arm signal construction at Bypass Road and Oaks Boulevard, and then continued roadway maintenance. Our local option sales tax fund is in the same predicament where the decline in revenues has affected the level of projects that we are able to fund. Funding from this fund, it supports infrastructure and capital priorities identified in the interlocal agreement. We typically can see anywhere from up to $12 million in this fund. However, for fiscal year 2026, our collections aren't even hitting $11 million, and so that has, as I said before, it's affected the level of projects. We do have $5.4 million of debt programmed in this fund, and then the remainder of that is covering capital projects. As Mike said, the general fund is not funding capital. Most of that capital has been shifted over into the local option sales tax. And this fund has historically funded most of the capital for the city anyway. So our building fund is still sitting healthy. It supports building safety operations through fee revenue from permitting and inspections. Its revenue is projected to be $4.4 million next year. That's pretty flat from the previous years, which is actually healthy in terms of a building fund for revenue to be flat as long as it's not decreasing. And most notably, the overall budget for the building fund is $9.1 million compared to $6.6 million that it was last year, and that jump is just due to an increase in reserves. So lastly, our community redevelopment special revenue fund. So that revenue is restricted to reinvestment inside the designated redevelopment district. So the city has 2 CRAs. We saw an overall increase of 15% in valuations between the 2 CRAs for an overall revenue generation of over $10 million between the 2 TIFs. So for downtown, we saw a 12% increase, and for Vine Street, we saw a 19% increase, and so that translates over to $547,000 for downtown and $789,000 for Vine Street. And that increase typically is flip-flop. Usually downtown increases more than Vine Street, but we saw the reverse this year with more growth in Vine Street. And so I'll hit on just a couple of our other major funds. So our Central Services Fund is an internal service fund. It includes our IT, facilities, and our fleet maintenance department. It is supported by transfers, mostly from the general fund. The fleet does have some charges that it charges outside vendors, but it's mostly supported by transfers from the general fund. We are projected to receive approximately $14.1 million in transfers from the general fund next fiscal year. That is down from the $14.6 million that we budgeted this current fiscal year, and that's just keeping in line with the general fund. As the transfers are coming from the general fund, we didn't fund as much capital, and so there also are no new positions planned within this fund. Our mobility fee fund is projected to generate approximately $1 million in fiscal year 27 revenue to be available for roadway projects and capacity improvements. And the same with our impact fee funds. Funding is available for capacity improvements. The city has 3 impact fee funds: police, fire, and recreation impact fees, with our police and fire being most newly implemented. So we are projected to generate approximately $1.25 million across those funds, with $500 being programmed for recreation impact fees, and then $350 apiece for police and fire. And so typically when I do the budget workshop, I like to think of it like an annual physical. So we kind of go over high level over all of the funds, and then we hit on some of the other major areas of which I call our vital signs. And so the first vital sign that we'll look at is the city's capital investment. So you'll see by the chart on the screen that we've averaged over $20 million of capital investment since fiscal year 2023. That's a substantial amount of capital, and it is well above our peers, which puts us in a good light. And you'll see the drop off though for fiscal year 27 of us only funding about $12 million in capital, and that's due to the drop off of general fund funding capital. So our next slide, our next vital sign, as I should say, is our debt service. And so we've been able to fund a lot of those capital investments that you saw on the previous slide because we have optimized debt service. And so that optimization has helped us propel commission priorities by leveraging the city's ability to borrow. And because we've maintained that second highest bond rating of AA+, that has helped us be able to optimize that. And so our last borrowing was Series 2024 A and B. That was for CRA projects, a couple of fire stations, and some transportation improvements. So previously, our debt service was around 6.6, but we had some retirements of debt, and then with the addition of the Series 2024, we are now sitting at $8.7 million in debt service annually, and that is spread across our sales tax, gas tax, and our CRA funds. So our next vital sign is going to be our intergovernmental revenue. So the cities, this is really where we really shine. We sit in a unique spot to where we get revenue from KUA and TOHO, and then we really aggressively pursue grants. And so this is why I believe the city really maximizes its internal or its intergovernmental revenue. And you'll see by the chart on the screen that we have, for last fiscal year, we brought in just over $22 million in grant revenue. That's a significant amount. The majority of that was for transportation projects, about 72% of that, with the biggest agency funding us being the U.S. Department of Transportation. And so a lot of that can be attributed to our airport. So our next vital sign will be our pensions. The city has 3 separate pension funds. Or not, they're pension funds and plans. But we have police, fire, and general. Each year we are required to have an actuarial evaluation to look at our funding contributions and to set those levels each year. The notable thing here is the increase that we've seen over the years. If you look back to fiscal year 2023, police has increased 171%, and this is our required amount. And so this is why I listed out the pension plans as one of our cost drivers, so you can kind of see the amounts that they've jumped over the past 5 years. So our fire plan has increased about 57% in what we've been required to contribute, and then our general plan's up 46% over the 3 plans. However, we do have an overall funded ratio between all 3 plans of 84%. That average has been about the same for the past 5 years, and it is in line with our peers and with state averages. So lastly, our last vital sign is our reserves. So as Mike mentioned, our reserves are projected to be 31% at the end of fiscal year 27. GFOA does recommend a minimum of 17%. And so the reserves that are available right now to absorb a bad year, they are shrinking, but that's something, that's a trend that we'll look at to see if we can alter. And so that concludes my slides. I will sit for any questions and turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question, Madam Mayor. May I be recognized?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. In the beginning, when we spoke about the plan to eliminate the, the gap that we have of the 5.126 million from the general fund gap, do we have a strategy on how we're going to, for the next, a 3-year plan, 5-year plan, how we're going to minimize that gap so we don't keep tapping into the general fund?
No. We've been traditionally tapping into the general fund reserve pretty much for probably 30 years, maybe longer. And it does tend to get replenished because what we have to do with regard to positions is budget as if 100% of the positions were full 100% of the time. Now, what we're going to find this year with the hiring freeze is that we'll have less of that extra funding that will return to the reserves at the end of this fiscal year. And so that's something that we've got to continue to look at, making efficiency improvements and cutting back in areas that we reasonably can in order to eliminate our reliance upon that as a mechanism to balance the budget.
Because I know as of right now, you've done a magnificent job, all of you, and we're in a very good and healthy position. But as time goes by with everything that's happening, which is all uncertain, if we keep putting our hand in the cookie jar, then we're going to end up with not enough cookies in there.
Yeah, and the reality is this year we've seen dipping revenues and or flat revenues, and that's indicative of the economic conditions nationwide. Hopeful that at some point in the future we'll see a recovery, and those days will then, hopefully return upon us. And when that does, then our reliance on the reserves shouldn't be as much of an issue as it is right now. But with Amendment 3 looming, that's a major hit to our budget. If it does pass, that's going to require additional measures that we're going to have to look at.
And as I did this, let's try this again. Thank you for that, Mike. Another question that I have also on the solid waste, based on the numbers that I found, it says that the reserve will be ending in about 148,229. Is that something that is good for solid waste with the amount of budget that they have for their reserves? Page 194.
194.
Now, it could be different in your book because, I did this off the PDF on the site.
The reserves for the solid waste fund, they are dipping into the reserves. I think it was about 800,000. However, they still have healthy reserves, and their 5-year, they're above 20%.
Okay, so we're safe.
Yes.
Okay.
The solid waste fund is healthy.
All right, thank you for that. All right, I don't have any further questions right now. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to the review of departments.
Yes, and Madam Mayor, Commissioners, it's really at your pleasure how you want to do that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question with regards to the reserve so that the public is informed of this. We are required to have a reserve.
Yes.
Yes, we are required by the feds to have a reserve.
Not necessarily. We're not required by the feds to have a reserve. And we're not necessarily required by the state either. If you do not have a reserve, your auditors will flag you, and then you will be considered like a fiscally constrained community, and then the state may come in if you don't have a plan. Most places, if they dip below a certain amount, they'll set an ordinance and say if they dip below a certain amount, then they have to put a plan in place to bring their reserves back up.
Is it a flat rate that you're required, or a percentage of what the budget is per year?
Most entities do a percentage of the budget. They do 17% or 2.5 months of reserves.
Because I don't want anybody to go out and say they got all this millions of dollars in the bank and they should be able to do this, that, and the third, but in reality, that money is required to be there.
Correct.
Okay.
In the City Commission,
I'm sorry.
The City Commission established a 20% reserve policy back in the early 2000s.
Right.
And we've held to that. We're in the 30%, 30-ish, mid-30s right now range. By the end of this upcoming budget, at the end of 2027, we anticipate we'll still be around 30 to 31%.
Okay.
So while it is an unsustainable path, we're not at the point where we'll go below 20% next year, unless Amendment 3 passes. Then it'll happen much quicker.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for clarification.
Thank you. So just review.
So, Madam Mayor, I don't know how you want to do this. What we've done in the past is I'll call out each department and the pages and ask if the Commission has any questions, and we certainly have our department heads or department representatives here if there's any questions that the Commission has directly of those individuals. If that's your pleasure, I'd be happy to get it rolling. Yep. Okay, so first department is the City Commission Department, which is pages 59 through 63. And we've largely kept this fund intact, given the Commission's desires last year to have the ability to do additional training, to do travel for economic development purposes, and as well to have the outside contracts, particularly the outside contract for the Commission Assistant. And so we have kept that funding intact in the budget. And we also budgeted for what we anticipate will be an increase in the Commission salary based on the population numbers that we will get from the University of Florida, which usually are out by now, but I'm hoping we'll see them any day now.
Commissioners, any question on this item?
No questions.
Okay, just move on to the next.
Okay, our next department is the city manager's department, and that starts on page 64. And we've tried to keep that as relatively flat as we could as well, factoring in the increase in workforce compensation increase, as well as the increases in pension and health care.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioners?
No questions, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Our next division, or department, I'm sorry, is economic development. That starts on page 79.
Commissioners?
And again, this is another department that we've tried to keep relatively flat. It's mostly personnel expenses. They do have funding budgeted as well for external partners that provide business assistance services, for instance, as well as events that we sponsor with various chambers and business organizations. And we have not proposed any cuts there. However, what we built into the budget for external funding cuts was $150,000, and that was primarily based on the commission. The last workshop, there was some discussion about the commission wanting to explore ending our partnership with the UCF incubator, which is an annual $150,000 contract. But we do have other options to get to that $150,000. I don't necessarily need feedback today, because I anticipate what we would do is come back to the commission with individual discussion items at a future commission meeting agenda to determine what you guys would like to consider cutting, if anything. One of the things that David has done is reached out to the University of Central Florida and said, you know, what other options would we have to reduce the funding there? They said they actually could live with a 50% cut and fund the other $75,000 through their budget. And then we've also anticipated that the commission might want not to fund the Osceola legislative effort, which I believe, even though the contract was reduced to $35,000, that we still have $40,000 in the budget for that.
Is that negotiable? Is that negotiable?
The expenses for Olay?
Yes.
I don't believe so, because we have discussed that in the past. They have contracts with lobbyists, and that's where the lion's share of the funding for that contract goes. It's something that we could broach with the chamber and see if they're interested in doing that.
Okay.
And then the other thing of note, Commissioners, is, and I'm going to get to this a little bit later, although we can talk about it now if you'd like, we also have the Social Services Quality of Life funding that you all put $400,000 in, and that actually comes out of your budget. So some of that funding could come out of that fund as well. And I'll pass some information out to you to take home so that you can consider it in the future. We will come back to you for that as well. But there's $55,000 in funding that you all approved for 3 different agencies that never came forward to claim that funding. They never submitted their invoices and their quarterly reports. And so that's essentially left $55,000 on the table. That's funding that you could consider, just not funding next year, to help us get to that 150 if you so choose.
Wow.
And then with regard to Kissimmee Main Street, I know that was a topic of discussion at the last meeting as well, and we've determined that Main Street can be fully funded through the Downtown CRA Fund. It's legal to do so. We checked the law on that, and we also checked the revenues and determined that it's reasonable that it could be absorbed without a hit to the budget.
Commissioners, any questions or comments?
No questions.
Thank you. Just moving right along.
So next department is City Attorney's budget, which is page 85. And that one is almost flat. The actual for 2025 was $592,000. The adjusted budget, actually it's a decrease, my apologies, is 619, and what's being proposed is $602,000 for the upcoming year.
Did we hire the other deputy attorney yet? Is it still posted out there for, it's, okay, it's still available, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's assistant city attorney. It is posted, and it is not a position that is frozen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right on.
Page 93 is our next department, which is finance. And I don't know, Tavia, if you want to handle this. But as you can see, it's pretty flat as well. Almost all personnel.
Yes.
And auditing fees.
Yes, and then there's also the charges by other funds that get lumped into ours. There's also the charges by other funds that get lumped into the finance budget. So I think the transfers, like I talked about, the central services funds, those get charged under finance and then transferred out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions on development services, our next department is, I'm sorry, finance. Our next department is development services, which starts on page 102, and it actually jumps to different areas. Besides the general fund, is the building division fund, there is our CDBG fund, there's the home fund, there is the SHIP fund, so there's various funds, as well as mobility funds that are managed by that department. And the general fund side of that department has also largely remained flat as well.
I have a question, going back to the finance director, sorry. On page 103, the contract services, you went from 516 to 195. What ended? Or like what was rebidded or what services were removed?
103?
103?
Yeah.
And that was under other contract services?
Hold on, give me one. This was, yeah, contract services.
So that's probably 96,
maybe?
yeah.
Yeah, my pages are a little bit different, sorry.
Are you comparing it to the estimate, possibly?
Yeah.
Okay, that's where funding might have been rolled forward for if we have GASB contracts or auditing stuff, additional fees that come up.
Okay.
But it's projected out at 516, but if it's not spent, it's returned to fund balance.
Yeah, and I understand it's a proposed budget, but I just wanted to see like what things are being shifted in, but thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, so development services we're on, which is 102 to 106. And again, we're not adding any positions, so a lot of this is status quo, I guess you'd call it. If there's no questions on development services, our next fund is the police department, pages 107 to 127. And you will see there a pretty significant increase in the total budget, and that's a product of the fact that we've added a fair amount of officers, as well as what Tavia talked about earlier with regard to pension costs and healthcare costs as well. And the good news, if there's anybody expresses any concerns with regard to the fact that we're not adding any personnel this year, but yet you're surely going to see an increase of our city population when the estimate comes out. My guess is around 2,000, maybe 2,500 population. We did get a grant from the federal government in order to hire 6 officers in the current fiscal year. And some of those positions that were added this current fiscal year as a result of that grant were actually scheduled to be hired in this upcoming fiscal year. And so we more or less were able to add those positions a year earlier. So more or less we're ahead of the game in that regard.
Commissioners, just stop us whenever you have a question so that Mike can just continue. That way I don't ask after each one, so just proceed.
All right, Commissioners, if you have no questions on police, our next department is the fire department. It starts on page 128. And you will see there, they're relatively flat from this current fiscal year, and that's because the big jump we made was in the current fiscal year with the addition of the fourth shift, as well as the revenue that was introduced by the fire fee that was, or the fire assessment that was added. Any questions on fire? Okay, our next department is Public Works. The general fund portion of the Public Works Department starts on page 136. And they've got various divisions. And you'll see it's relatively flat here as well. There's been some decreases, for instance, in the engineering division. It's actually a decrease from the current year budget by almost $100,000, but then you'll see a corresponding increase in the administration division, and that was due to internal reorganization. But that team is pretty well loaded for all of the capital projects that are underway that they're managing. And that's the good news too when we talk about capital projects that, you know, as Tavia mentioned, we usually spend about $20 million in capital projects annually. And this next year we're only proposing 12. But the good news is we've got probably way more than $20 million in projects that are already underway in the current year that will transition over into the next year. The 2 fire stations that we're constructing, the convention center that will be under construction here shortly, the air traffic control tower, the paving program that we'll continue to do. So there's a number of projects that are underway. The Berlinski House is funded, so we'll even though those amounts are not reflected in next year's budget, that funding is already reflected in the current year budget. So we're not slowing down at all with regard to capital projects. Is there any questions on Public Works? If not, we can go to page 151, which is Parks and Recreation. And again, with the general fund, Parks and Recreation has taken some hits, particularly in the Parks Division, and that's where we've got some positions frozen. We've eliminated some positions in the current year. And that, of course, is also the area where that has seen probably the biggest hit in regards to capital expenditures for the future, because with our projections, we just didn't see a sustainable way to fund a major project in the Lancaster Ranch construction. I did forward you today the draft of the study that was done for the siting of the field house. With that being a P3 partnership, it's a unique, we have a good opportunity there to have perhaps some of the, if you choose to locate it on Lancaster, we have an opportunity to fund some of the improvements for Lancaster through that public-private partnership. Is there any questions on Parks and Recreation that goes through to page 171? And if not, our next department is Human Resources, and that starts on page 172. And they're also very heavily weighted in expense-wise in personnel, and you'll see a reduction in their budget there as well. They've actually had 2 positions that were eliminated through the freeze this year.
So I have a question with regards to HR. That's where the determination of what the percentages for the raise for the next fiscal year is decided. Am I correct?
We actually do that as a budget committee. It's part of one of the main components we build into the budget and trying to balance. And what we typically do is benchmark with other governments, i.e. our competitors in hiring. And so typically, I think you're aware, we do the 4 local governments in Osceola County, as well as the 3 utilities to get together monthly, and we meet. And we basically share notes and try to keep consistent with the raises we each give. I've always tried to beat them by 1% if I can. This year was tough to justify that, but we're all in about the same ballpark. I think the county in St. Cloud are at 3%. The utilities, I believe, are 3.5 or 4. So they're a little bit more, but they're a different market than we are in terms of the personnel market. And then, of course, the school district is a completely different animal with regard to the workforce compensation.
Here's what I'd like to see, because I believe in reality, this 3% raise, technically speaking, they're not going to see this. It's so small. And I know that it has to be like that, but I think we can divert to another option. 3% is probably what, maybe over the course of a year, maybe an extra, I'm speaking hypothetically, this might not be the exact figure. It may be an extra $1,000. It could be less than that, it could be a little bit more. Why not just give them a one-time payout and then freeze their salary? At least they'll be able to see the one-time payout. And we're in a situation right now, and I'm talking about countrywide, where people are really struggling. And I think that could ease a burden if we did that, as opposed to telling them we're giving you a 3% raise and you're going to see what, $4 on it each pay period, probably. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, commissioners? Mayor? Does that make sense?
I guess it just really depends. 3% of what? You know, it's just
Right.
Everyone is different. You
Right.
know what I mean? So it's hard to just say like a flat dollar amount. It just
Right.
it'll affect some more than others.
Exactly.
So I don't know what the right answer is. I'll leave that to the experts. So
The problem with doing a one-time is once you give that raise for that fiscal year, the next year you're starting back to where you were at the beginning of the fiscal year you gave that $1,000 raise. And so the actual pay range doesn't go up. And so part of the problem we have if we were to do a one-time, their pay range isn't going to go up. So now we have a compression problem because, say, you've been here a year, you got a $1,000 increase, and then somebody gets hired. When you're towards the end of that year, a new person gets hired, they're making the same exact as you are. And we have compression problem, particularly in the police department in that regard.
I think you've had a compression issue in the past.
Yes.
And so that's what I would caution. Like,
Yes.
Compression is an issue if we don't follow a trend.
Yes.
So that would be my biggest concern on that. But, again.
That's the biggest concern.
defer
And
to
so what we've done in the past when we've faced financial limitations, if say, for instance, you were arguing, hey, 3% isn't very much, couldn't we do 4%? Then what I would say to you is, with the uncertainty of the economy and the Amendment 3 issue, I would say, well, maybe we could do a 3% and then do one-time bonus that is equivalent to an additional percent. The school district does that, for instance, because it doesn't, once you give the percentages, we have to calculate that 3% for the next.
That's a slippery slope, though.
Right.
You've got to be real careful with that.
Right.
I mean, it's a percentage again, the commissioners can all have a different opinion, but I always worry about compression because I saw when the recession happened that definitely, in a period of recession, compression is an issue.
Yes.
So I look at it a little different. I understand your point, where $1,000 might benefit a certain level of pay, but doesn't benefit other positions. It's just very, very tricky to do it that way. I mean, if you wanted to do an analysis and see how that would.
Yeah, we could look at that.
Perhaps that's a great way of looking at it, but, always bear in mind that compression can become an issue as we journey, right? Because today might not be an issue, 2028, 2030 might be an issue.
Yes.
So when we're not around. So it's just important to keep that in mind.
And that's the issue we ran into during the Great Recession. It was 5 years we gave 0 raises, but we did give one-time bonuses in those years to help people get by. And the problem we had is exactly what the mayor's talking about. We had significant compression issues, and it took us a good decade to dig out of those compression issues. And then we had to catch up with just the overall pay range issue we were having. And it was hard to attract, particularly some of those higher demand positions, engineers and accountants.
New hires sometimes end up making more
Absolutely.
money than the old hires, and we've
Yes.
seen that. We're just about breaking even at this point. It's what my understanding, but
We'll take a look at it.
again, yeah, if you do an analysis,
Okay.
that would.
When we did the last budget workshop, oh, sorry, Madam Mayor, may I be recognized? When we did the last budget workshop, we talked about that there are possibilities that we have to, instead of cutting jobs, we would freeze the rates that they're at. I can't remember if it was on the record or off the record, the conversation where, we talk about what we can do now that we're in a good position rather than to wait and then we can't actually do anything because we're in a situation where, so that I think that analysis is a great idea to see what we can do since we're in a good position now for the staff.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on human resources? One of the things that always comes up, and I hear other governments do this, is, and it does impact the raises and the impacts to the individual's bottom line, particularly our lower paid employees, is that a lot of other governments are now starting to charge their employees for a portion of their health care coverage, which we provide as a benefit free to the employee. The employee only has to pay for the dependents. And it's something that we've talked about very briefly, but came to the conclusion that when you do that, the criticism you hear and real impact you see is that it completely wipes away or for a large part wipes away whatever increase that you budgeted. So what's the point in doing that? But it's at some level, if Amendment 3 passes and we face really difficult times in the future, it's something we may need to look at. But it's not something we're proposing at this point. Any other questions on human resources? And our next department then is the airport, page 195 through 199. And as the Commission's aware, this is wholly funded by its revenues. And pound for pound, they're probably doing the most capital improvements out of any of the departments. And we're very excited that we're going to move forward with the tower we've been trying to get for almost 2 decades. And Customs has also really proven, just the announcement of Customs has proven to be a major source of excitement for investors and different companies that are now looking at Kissimmee Gateway Airport as a real viable option for their businesses. So I think that's only going to help our economy.
I agree.
Any questions on airport?
Yes, I have a question. We have a groundbreaking on July 2025 last year for the Hyatt Studio Hotel. That was supposed to be expected delivery this year at the end of the year. What is the status of the hotel right now?
So the last update that we got was they had hoped to be under construction this month, and that has not happened. I could call Sean up to see if he's got any further updates.
Hello, Mayor, Commissioners. The last update I received from the group, they are in permitting. They are working on a bigger project right now. They're looking at that whole MLK corridor. They've been talking to another airport tenant there, which has the large aircraft simulators. They're interested in moving out of that hangar into their own facility and expanding those services. So they're in negotiations with them and with a financing group. They're looking at over $116 million build-out project. And so it's kind of delayed the hotel, is what they've told me, because they want to incorporate all that as one package. Now, I've encouraged them to concentrate on that hotel, to keep moving forward, making sure the permitting gets through, so that when they're ready, they can construct everything at one time. But I've also asked them then to give us what we would consider an unsolicited proposal for that whole build-out. They're having these conversations, but I've asked them to bring that to the city to show us what that full package looks like and the progress of that, so that we're confident that they're moving forward with those projects.
That is a good answer, but let me ask you something. If we have any penalty if they don't deliver on time in the contract, because everything looks like a nice, good work, but we need that project to be finished ASAP. We don't have time to be waiting. If they doesn't have the finance, we have to move forward with something else.
Yep, I understand. And that's the conversation that we had earlier this week with them, is that they have to cure and perform on that, because come June 1st of 2027, we have a minimum guaranteed revenue amount that they're going to start paying the airport, whether there's a hotel there or not. And so they're on the hook to pay the bills because we're budgeting for it.
It is very important to accomplish with all the plans. You remember when we had the issue with the landing fees, nothing was happening, and now we have a revenue of $3.1 million. That is something like accomplished our work as a commissioner, because we work hard to get that approved. We have too many issues with the pilots and everybody. But one question, it is possible in the future to increase a little bit the landing fees as well?
Yes, and actually we're looking at increasing the landing fees possibly from $3 to $3.75 this round in order to assist with some additional technology that we've had to put in place because of legislation that says we can't use the ADS-B technology in aircraft, and so we've had to put in a camera system much similar to what we have on our toll roads to physically take pictures and get data in order to keep the revenue coming in. That revenue is very important for us right now. We're really in a transitional period at the airport. We have a lot of property, that we're aggressively developing with our economic development plan. But with these large projects like the tower, $22 million taxiway renovation, the customs, it's really important that we stay disciplined and keep the revenue in place with those landing fees.
Another question what I have for you. You received the email, the invitation from Mexico, where the governor of Jalisco and Guadalajara, the director of the airport, they want to make a friendship with us, like a good relation. Do you have any position on that? You're planning to go, or you're not gonna go?
I guess I don't know enough about that trip, and with the out-of-state travel policy, I'm a little concerned. I think we need to know a little bit more about the trip and what the expectations are, what economic development trade-off they're looking for. We're just now announcing customs, and so the customs facility won't be in place for a good year. So to even accept flights from Mexico directly here is going to take some time. So I just need to understand a little more what this trip would all involve and what the, the benefits and outcomes would be of that.
And he was only invited to the Morelia, did I say it right?
Yeah, Morelia.
Yeah, Morelia portion of it, not the Jalisco portion of it.
Because I do believe our airport has the potential to increase the return of too much accomplishment with everything, hotel, custom. We have to move forward. We need money in the city. This is one of the opportunities. I heard that other countries, they have interest as well. Thank you.
Okay.
But listen, I would like to have something strong, steady, finally, with the project for the hotel, with the 122 rooms. If they cannot afford it, let's move forward with something else.
I will convey that message.
Will they have to amend their lease in order to pursue that second portion of the project?
No, I would like to treat it separately, separate
Okay.
lease. And I think it makes more sense per parcel that we have a lease, like we have a lease for the hotel. If they do a training center, separate lease for that, separate lease for the next hotel student housing that they're looking at. That way in the future, if for some reason, the company wants to sell or do something differently, it won't affect the whole campus as one.
All right, thank you.
I do have a question on that. I mean, it seems like they were going to build a hotel. Everything just kind of froze. And now the excuse is that they're going to add more to this when they haven't even done part A. I just feel that maybe that's something you should probably, Mike, address. And I mean, I lean on you because honestly, that you go from doing a groundbreaking to where we're going to start, then let's not do groundbreakings that make us look like we're not doing the right thing. It's embarrassing. That is embarrassing to do a groundbreaking and everyone's excited, we're shoveling dirt, and now we're renegotiating or adding, or how did this happen? I mean, the contract is the contract, and now you're going to add? Should it be treated as a separate contract, or should it be treated as an addendum to this contract? I mean, I'm not sure, but that project has been going on way before I was a mayor.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it's just going to continue going on. And I mean, who's responsible for answers?
They submitted the same time, formally submitted the same time that Azure and Skyview did. And
My point, yeah.
Azure's getting ready to go. Skyview, we're in the final weeks of negotiation and should be coming to you in September for approval. So.
And the personnel has changed. Juan Lopez is no longer there, is my understanding.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last
Their
part.
personnel has changed. Like the person that was always reaching out, he's not even with that company anymore. Not that it matters, because I'm sure they've got some other person now, leading the way. But I just feel that if we had a contract to build one thing, and it continues getting pushed back, and we just keep allowing these changes, maybe that should be handled as a separate item, all in itself, as you said.
It will. I made it very clear to them that we will not move forward with anything additional until we have some performance results with the first one. I'm still dealing with the same people. They've actually added a couple other people. They have a COO now who has a good business background. And I met with him last week, and I said, this is the person that I need, a project manager, somebody who can start structuring this with the design team, start having progress meetings, and get this on track and start meeting some milestones.
Madam Mayor, may I be recognized?
Sure.
Thank you. Mike, this question is for you. Can we get them back in here?
We could, absolutely.
Yeah, because I want to know what's going on.
Yeah, we could do that.
I missed the groundbreaking, thank God. But, yeah, because I feel like the mayor said, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, everything else is moving, And I got to give credit to the mayor. Since day one that she got in here, we've been pushing. And, I've been saying that behind closed doors, and I'll say it in public. We've been pushing, we're getting things done, and now we're playing procrastination. So I would like to see, as soon as possible, since they already have all this already basically concrete, we would like to know what's going on as well. They can come back in here with some little billboards and stuff like they did the first time, show us what it is that they're planning to do, and also explain where we are with the projects that we have at hand, that we have a contract, that there's groundbreaking, that there's construction that should have started by now. So I kind of get a feeling, I can't speak for all the board, but based on the feeling that I'm getting up here, we want answers. And the sooner we can get them in here, the better, so we can have those.
We can do that, and we can schedule a discussion item to bring him in here, have them do a presentation to you with an update, and give you an opportunity to ask questions on their progress. And, I think that'd be reasonable.
That'd be great.
I know from the beginning that project's gonna fail with that group.
Yeah, it's full faith it's going to fail.
I know that.
Oh, well.
That's why I never vote for them to deliver the project here in Monument.
What I want to avoid, pardon me, is I don't want to do this one-on-one with these developers.
Yeah.
I'd rather have them come here and speak to all of us. I don't.
That sounds
I
good.
didn't meet with Azure because I don't want to meet one-on-one with them because so much is said.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have it right here in front of everyone. If anyone has questions, it should be asked right here, as opposed to 5 different meetings It's just how
When you,
one.
when you present on the record, it's usually more accurate statements are made,
Correct.
Yeah, that way there's not 5 different stories being told to each
Exactly.
commissioner.
Yeah, I agree.
usually.
All right, so I guess that was our soapbox for that development, so thank you.
Okay, we'll get it scheduled.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Send a message, don't play with our commissioners.
Okay, the last, is there any other questions on the airport?
Nah, we're good. I'm good.
The smallest budget got the most questions.
Small but mighty.
Yeah. All right, so has the biggest economic impact, I guess. The last department is Central Services Fund, is the Information Technology Department. That begins on page 201. And there you can see their proposed budget is just moderately higher than last year, or the current year, I'm sorry. If there's no questions on information technology, then we can move on to the next segment of the agenda, which is section 5, which is general discussion. And as I mentioned earlier, we programmed in a modest $150,000 decrease in
Mike.
the nonprofit. I know, I wish it was 1.5. We don't give that much money out. A modest $150,000 decrease in nonprofit funding, which basically between economic development funds approximately $260,000 worth of external agencies. The commission funds approximately $400,000 in external entities. And so you're talking about $650,000 in total. And that does not include, as we talked about a little earlier as well, OLE, which is an additional 30 or 40,000 is what we have in the budget. So what I'd like to do, commissioners, unless you have specific feedback tonight, is just give you, I should have done this earlier so you could look at it, is give you copies of the amounts that we fund for each of these, just so you can take a look, and then what we'll do is come back, we'll schedule it for like a discussion item on a future commission agenda, and get a little more into detail. That is what I'm able to do. The first one is the social service funding, and please note, Transition House, Hope Partnership, and Church and Community Assistance Program, none of them have claimed their funding. So that leaves $55,000 of that budget that has not been expended. Well, thank you. Transition House, $15,000. CCAP, which is $15,000, and that's higher up on the list. Our Church and Community Assistance Program. And then just above that is Hope Partnership. They did not claim their funding either. Matter of fact, I think they told Desiree they were not intending to utilize our funding. The second sheet I'm going to hand you is the funding that is budgeted in the Economic Development Department for external business assistance programs, sponsorships that we do for galas and things like that. And so that funding is also something we can look at. I do have, our goal was to put together an agenda item to talk about that under discussion at a commission meeting, because we do have cost-benefit analysis that was done by economic development, particularly on the business assistance programs, that shows the rate of return that we get for funding some of the business assistance programs. For instance, the Small Business Development Center at $30,000 and Prospera at $20,000 give us some of the biggest bang for our buck in terms of the amount that we fund versus the number of businesses that they assist each and every year. While the UCF Incubator, which does have a more comprehensive program, A to Z to get a business started, is the least at $150,000. I think they have 11 businesses in there now that they're starting up. So just food for thought. Unless the commission has any specific direction you'd like to provide tonight, we'd be glad to make
Question.
Yes.
I don't see the NAACP event on here.
That is funded through, I think, the commission budget. So it's I haven't given you guys any of your funding. We've kept all of your funding the same. I haven't proposed any cuts to the commission funding other than the Osceola legislative effort based on our prior discussion at the prior workshops.
So that's in our budget?
That's in your budget, yes.
So how many events is in our budget then?
Quite a bit. We can go back to... And just to let you guys know, Desiree could not be here tonight due to a family emergency, but she was going to handle this maybe a little flat-footed on this. But let's see. What page?
61. 61.
61. Special functions, 38,000, or the
Dues and memberships.
okay, and memberships is 77,000. So what we could do is we could break out the commission line items under the dues and subscriptions, and the special functions, and I think other contract services may also have some line items in there that the commission can look at as well if you want to consider that funding.
Madam Mayor, may I be recognized, please? Thank you. So I have, don't want to make that noise when you just push it. I still feel like before we make any determination, I know we're coming back with the social services funding. I still think there is a lot of value in allowing these organizations to come and give a short presentation so that way we can kind of see which services are duplicated, who can partner with who, instead of us making a decision without allowing that process. So I know we spoke about it in the past, but do you think that's something that we can still do?
We can. Actually, I'm remiss in probably the biggest point that Desiree wanted me to make sure to make today, and that was, do you all want to go back to opening up the process like we have in years past, or do you want to replicate what we did this current fiscal year, which was basically direct all the funding that's in here, that's already been budgeted, to these individual agencies to be handled through the Haven? Because that's what you all decided last year, and you gave Desiree the discretion to work with these entities and try to tie them into the services that we provide through the Haven. And that may be why some of these entities decided not to pursue funding.
That's exactly what my train thought was, because you know, our baby right now is the Haven on Vine, and we provide basically a wraparound services from employment to education, whatever it is that they need, we have it all there. So at least if we fund agencies, we can fund agencies that are directly involved and that they can help, you know, our constituents that are living inside Haven on Vine, but also the surrounding, you know, the city, other people as well. So that's why I was trying to figure out which one is which to see what resources we can actually allocate that are going to continue as well, helping our Haven on Vine.
What we could do is schedule, as we were planning to do this anyway, is with our discussion item, give you a little bit more detail as to how we would integrate these services into the Haven on Vine, and we can come up with a game plan for giving the organizations an opportunity to come before the board, and we could do a workshop of some sort even if we needed to. Sure.
Okay, the Central Florida Hotel Lodging Association annual event. We buy tables for that?
We budget for it. I'm not sure if we have in the recent past.
Seen that.
David, do you have a minute to come up, or the ability to address those questions?
It's budgeted, not always are purchased as far as tables. Sometimes it's individual tickets, but it's budgeted.
Okay, but I've never even seen that line item on a budget. Is this something new is what I'm asking?
Yeah, this is funding that you also had in the budget this current year.
Yes, it's in bulk.
I think it's in a line item. It's in a line item, like for table events and stuff like that. That's like the, what is it, like $38,000 or something like that? That is allocated for that funding?
Yes, it's in special functions. The line item should be here for those particular events.
Okay, and I also don't see one here for the Caribbean Association.
Yeah, that also
Okay.
would be in the commission's line items. Because
I'm
these,
just completely confused why some
It's
is
all in a pot. It's like in one pot. Instead of every single name showing up or something, it's all
get-
in one pot.
Okay,
so the difference is city commission, the entities that are funded in the city commission are different than the entities that are funded in economic development. The only entities that are funded in economic development are those entities that are chambers of commerce, or business associations, or those types, anything to do with business, economic growth, that sort of thing. Whereas what's in the commission budget is more civic groups, community organizations, those types of things.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? So what we'll do with regard to the nonprofit funding is at one of the meetings in September, or possibly one of the first meetings after the new budget is in place, and in October, although I think we'd like to try to do it earlier just so I can get to that $150,000 cut number, is at least do the economic development ones in September, and then we can come to you either in September or in October for the social services discussion, because that'll probably take a little more time to get the outside groups in here anyway.
Okay.
Any other questions or thoughts? And of course, as you have this paperwork in your possession, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to call me or David or whoever.
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Rodriguez. Too many people approach me like they are receiving a survey where they have to explain how they spend the money for the boot program. No one knows, everybody's confused. That is something like it's going to be any penalty if they don't answer. Survey is a survey. Mm-hmm. But what I know so far is like the letter what your department is sending is like it's going to be some penalties or anything. No one knows about that. That is something never was bring to the commission. No one knows about that. So do you have an explanation for that?
That is part of closing the program, and the guidelines for the source of the funding for these grants require the city to report back and to gather information on how funds were used. At this time, grant recipients are not being required to provide documentation. Is just to answer how funds were used and what the impact was in their businesses, which is something that the federal government expects us to report back.
So in essence, it's more of a survey than it is
Yes.
A provision of documentation.
Yes, exactly.
I do believe like we have to be more clear with the constituents who receive that money and let them know, because some people, they are afraid. Some of them, they are thinking, well, if you guys grant me the money, why I have to give an explanation what you give me already? Mm-hmm. So
Many have responded and has provided the certifications and the information, so we
I think
expect others
if we did it by SurveyMonkey or something, it would have been a little friendlier.
probably.
But we did have to there was a line in there that we had to put from the federal guidelines that seemed a little threatening, because it did say under the guidelines we could take the money back if you don't respond. And the way I understand it from Desiree's research, it's not mandatory that everybody respond.
That's true.
but I do believe that is something was supposed to let them know from the beginning before they apply for
Yes.
the grant.
Yeah, and that's something that with this grant program, it's something that we did not anticipate needing to do until we got into it. I think this attempt is basically to try to gather as much information as we can post-award so that we can report back as reasonably as we can to the federal government.
Right. Thank you.
Is there a deadline? that they have to submit the information back to you? Is there a deadline?
We don't have a deadline to report, but there was a deadline provided to the grant recipients of December, the 24th. It can be extended. It's not that we have a hard deadline, but we had to administer a deadline, at least, give some reasonable time.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on nonprofit funding, economic development?
No.
The next topic point under Section 5 that I wanted to ask the Commission for feedback on is regarding travel and training. Citywide, we've instituted an out-of-state travel ban for the departments, with exceptions for issues that are critical in nature, i.e. The police department has specialized training that they have to do that may only be offered out of state. And so we do have the exception in place. What I wasn't sure, because I'm starting to get requests from the commissioners, as to whether or not the commission intends to do an out-of-state travel ban, or do you want to make exceptions for certain types of trainings that are line item budgeted, as well as maybe economic development trips, or just not have a travel ban for the commission outside the state?
Madam Mayor, may I be recognized? Thank you. I think I don't have an issue with the out-of-state travel for the commissioners, but I think that every item should be brought to the board so that we can evaluate and make sure that it is something that is going to benefit the city. And if it's something that's going to benefit the city and we all agreed upon, I wouldn't see an issue with it. But it has to be, a good trip, something that's worth it, something that's going to bring business back, not the should've, could've, would've's. So I don't think it should be banned completely, because there are trainings and other things like the Florida League of Cities, the National Florida League of Cities, that some of the commissioners might be able to attend. And these are courses and things that help us gather information and also educate ourselves on our new things that other cities are doing that are implemented and are working for them, and they can help us when we go around to do our priorities for the year. Thank you.
We have budgeted for the same travel as you all had budgeted in the current fiscal year, so it really doesn't matter. Matter of fact, I think your year-to-date is only about half of what we budgeted for travel.
It's budgeted $38,000.
I'm
Yeah, I
fine
think
either
you've
way.
spent 17 maybe.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, you okay?
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me.
Any other questions on that or direction on that? We'll keep it status quo, which means the policy as well, unless there's any changes in that directed by the commission. The last item on the agenda is the limited hiring freeze. And again, this is just a recap, because I know there was a lot of consternation about the game plan that we had discussed at the earlier workshops. Particularly, I think there was some I don't want to say confusion, but just concern that there might be layoffs. And that is not something we are proposing for this upcoming fiscal year. In order to balance the budget. Our goal at this point is to carry forward the hiring freeze that we have in place. That hiring freeze is not absolute. It does give us the ability to make exceptions, particularly for frontline public safety employees, as well as critical positions in each of the departments that are necessary to carry out tasks. And, as a for instance, we might only have one arborist in Parks and Recreation, or we might only have 2 herbicide specialists, or 1 or 2 traffic signal techs in traffic. And so in those situations, we can't freeze positions when we only have 1 or 2 people in those positions. And so the goal is to try to get to, we had penciled into the budget a $1.5 million cut in personnel costs. And the goal is to freeze as many non-essential positions as we can throughout the fiscal year to get to that magic number. Of course, if Amendment 3 passes, we're going to have a whole new discussion on, how we balance the budget going forward. And that's going to take, a very, very long and hard discussion. But we're going to be putting together a interdepartmental committee to look at various positions, look at ways that we can recommend efficiencies within the different departments. I'll give you an example of an effort that's already underway. The Public Works Department has traditionally handled what's called the Downtown Clean Team. Parks and Recreation their maintenance folks have handled landscape maintenance for not just Lakefront Park, but all of the city landscape streets between the railroad tracks and the Lakefront Park. And so why do we have two different departments, two different crews with two different sets of equipment managing areas that are adjacent to each other? And so the interdepartmental effort between Public Works and Parks and Recreation has been to combine that team into one, let Parks take it over. That frees up some folks to go over to Public Works to bolster other areas that they're shorthanded in, which allows us to essentially get the same amount of work or more work out of essentially less people, and that's the goal. So those are the types of things we're going to be looking at over the next month or so. If we hit any point at which we feel like we might need to do some reorganizations to make efficiency improvements, i.e. meaning transferring people to different positions, we'll certainly bring that back to the commission because it would require an amendment to the budget. But at this time, our goal is hiring freeze, and hopefully that gets us to where we need to go. Any questions or comments from the commissioners on that?
Well, I would like to see a list of all vacant positions at the city with the position control number, position title, total dollar amount for salaries and benefit that we can put in hold.
Okay, list of those positions, those vacant positions.
Open vacancies, right?
Yeah.
I got you.
Okay, we can provide that. And we'll also break it out by funds as well, because the positions that are in non-general fund departments are not positions we necessarily have to freeze, because really the general fund is the only fund that we're concerned about. And so it's primarily, I'll give you an example. We have 51 full-time positions that are currently vacant. And of those 51, I think about half, a little more than half, are general fund positions. And so those are positions that would be subject to the freeze, less those critical positions that I've already given approval to the departments to fill. So we'll provide that information to you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and
Thank you.
commissioners. We really appreciate your feedback today. I think this has been very productive, and we look forward to coming back at the hearings on Wednesday, the September 9th, and Tuesday, September 22, will be our two budget hearings. Okay. And under the new state law, we need 4 of the 5 commissioners present to vote yes for the current millage rate, because even keeping the current millage rate requires a 4/5 vote under the new state statute.
So do we make a motion to approve the current millage rate, or is just?
You did that at the last workshop,
Okay.
so we don't need any action tonight.
Okay, all righty. Well, thank you. I will call a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Thank you, commissioners.
Aye. Thank you.
To everybody.
Thank you.